It's time now to beat the waiver wire ahead of week 14. Welcome to Fantasy Football Today Express. I'm Jamie Eisenberg. That's Dave Richard. It's Fantasy Football Today Express. We're going to give you some waiver wire options to get ahead of week 14. We have 6 teams on a bye, so you want to make sure that you're good to go and have that lineup ready. Get some players that might help you heading into an important stretch for fantasy managers, Dave. As we know, the fantasy playoffs are quickly approaching. Some leagues actually starting their playoffs in week 14. So let's start with the quarterbacks. So we're looking to add on the waiver wire. Here are the 6 teams that are going to be off for week 14. We have Baltimore, Denver, Houston, Indianapolis, New England, and Washington. So no Lamar Jackson, no Bo Nix, no CJ Stroud, no Richardson, and no Jane Daniels along with Drake May.
And so there's going to be a lot of quarterbacks that need to be picked up, and getting ahead of it makes a ton of sense. I'll start with Trevor Lawrence taking on Tennessee. It looks like he's going to play in week 13, and he was taking on the Titans in week 14. That's a pretty good thing. Entering week 13, Tennessee at least 21 fantasy points to 4 of the past 6 quarterbacks that they face, and they face Jane Daniels. So that could very easily look like 5 of the past 7. Lawrence is out there in 56% of CBS Sports leagues. Will Levis in that same game going up against Jacksonville. That defense has been great against the pass this year. He's 76% available. I think a lot of people are going to be starting Will Levis as a bye week replacement in week 14. And then 3 other names. Derek Carr against the Giants. That's pretty desirable. He's just not as widely available as Lawrence or Levis. Aaron Rodgers against the Dolphins. And Jameis Winston against Pittsburgh. You know, in the snow, in the second half, Jameis started to get things going against the Steelers. If the weather isn't that bad in Pittsburgh, I wonder if we'll have 4 quarters of getting things together. He's 5th on this list, but somebody that people could pick up as a bye week replacement.
If you're looking at 2 quarterback and super flex leagues, Tommy DeVito, Cooper Rush, those guys might have, Tommy DeVito most likely will start against New Orleans.
Sure.
You have Cooper Rush, not an easy matchup. No, I'm sorry, good matchup against Cincinnati. So
Sure.
could be a situation where those 2 guys might be able to help you.
Yeah, the problem is that it's going to be hard to pick them up because they've already played. It depends on your league's rules.
Oh, you're right. Yep.
You might be. There are some leagues where you can pick up people even after they've played a Thursday game. But Cooper Rush, I'm in a keeper league, Jamie. It's super deep. Quarterbacks are stashed. I'm starting Cooper Rush as my bye week replacement over Lamar Jackson. I'd throw Aiden O'Connell on that list as well.
That's a good call. Yeah, O'Connell's not played
yet. He's way down on the list.
At least as of this recording, he has not played. So it could be already have played if you are listening to this later in the day or over the weekend. All right, let's go to the running backs again. So here are the guys that are going to be missing. No Derrick Henry, no Broncos running backs, no Joe Mixon, no Jonathan Taylor, no Ramondre Stevenson, and no Brian Robinson and or Austin Eckler. So who are the running backs that we're looking at?
I think whether you need him or not, Kamani Vidal needs to be rostered. 86% available. Everybody rushed to get Gus Edwards, and it makes sense. Gus is the veteran. Coaches are probably going to trust him quite a bit, but Kamani Vidal is younger. He's got fresh legs. Saw him make a big catch earlier this season. He's somebody that I would want to stash. I do not like the matchup in week 14 at Kansas City, but I'll lay out a scenario for you, Jamie. What if Dobbins isn't ready to play, and what if Gus stinks? This could be a game where Kamani Vidal ends up getting a decent amount of work, and as a bye week running back, maybe he can come through for like 8 PPR points. I almost feel like that's a little optimistic, but I think there's a pathway to it. I think he's the best running back that you could pick up and not only just stash for week 14, but potentially have as an option for the rest of the regular season. We just don't know how long J.K. Dobbins is going to be out. Fingers crossed that Dobbins will be back soon. 2 other names on the list, Jerome Ford and Braylon Allen. Allen obviously tied to Breece Hall. We'll see if Breece Hall plays in week 13. If he doesn't, then Braylon Allen in week 14, potentially, if Breece isn't ready for that game, gets Miami. And then Jerome Ford at Pittsburgh. It's a game where I don't think the Browns are going to be playing with a lead like they were earlier this season. If they're chasing points, that puts Jerome Ford on the field. You could do worse. And he might even be able to beat 8 PPR points that Kamani Vidal we were cautiously nervous about.
Yeah, don't overlook some of the handcuffs also that still may be available, just in case there's an injury this weekend. So you got Ray Davis and Ty Johnson in Buffalo, Blake Corum for the Rams. These are some stash candidates that just in case something happens, they may be of service to you. Trying to think of anybody else that jumps off.
If I've got James Conner and I watched him play last week, he doesn't look great. And if it keeps up, Trey Benson would absolutely be somebody I'd want to have on my bench ready to go in case Conner struggles, gets benched, gets hurt. You know the deal. There are plenty of pathways for Benson to get on the field.
And there's also a scenario we saw it last week where Kenneth Gainwell scored a late touchdown for the Eagles. They get the Panthers in week 14. There could be some garbage time work for Kenneth Gainwell there in some, deeper leagues. Also, you have the handcuff locked up for the Eagles just in case something happens there. All right, let's go to actually let's take a quick break and then we'll come back and get into the wide receivers and tight ends. We're back here on Fantasy Football Today Express. So again, 6 teams on a bye: Baltimore, Denver, Houston, Indianapolis, New England, Washington. I can't list all the wide receivers because there's a lot of them. So Dave, who are the wide receivers looking to pick up ahead of the waiver wire?
What are we going to do without Deontay Johnson, Jamie? Oh my gosh. Keon Coleman, I would put in that same bucket as Kamani Vidal. He's somebody that I would want to roster whether I need him or not. He takes on the Rams. That is a favorable matchup. We do expect him back in week 13. It's week 14 at the Rams. Available in a little more than a third of CBS Sports leagues, right around 40%. He's somebody that I would absolutely love to have on my bench in case he becomes the number one guy for Buffalo rest of season. The list, it goes right straight down after that. It's Nick Westbrook-Akine against Jacksonville. It's Marquez Valdez-Scantling at the Giants. Just favorable matchups for boom-bust receivers. What about Elijah Moore, who could be good for 10, 12 PPR points against Pittsburgh? Again, just the same rationale that I had for Jerome Ford, where if the Browns are chasing points or if they're not able to run the football, they got to do something to move the chains. And Elijah Moore's been somebody that's been good at doing that with Jameis Winston. Those are the biggest names. I could list off a bunch of other guys. There are a lot of receivers that are on bye in week 14 that I wouldn't mind considering stashing on my bench for the postseason run, but I don't have to add them now. I can add them the day before week 14 really kicks off. Names like Devon Vele, Alec Pierce, Demario Douglas is a name that we've tossed around a little bit. Decent bench options at wide receiver.
I'll give you 3 more. One, if you can still add somebody if they played already, is Brandon Cooks, just with the situation of CeeDee Lamb dealing with the shoulder injury. He had 7 targets, 3 catches, 16 yards, and a touchdown. 2 more that are of interest. Trey Tucker's coming off a big game last week for the Raiders. They get Tampa Bay in week 14, so just in case there's a connection there with Aiden O'Connell. And then Parker Washington, we know that the receiving core right now is pretty beat up for the Jaguars. If Trevor Lawrence does play each of the next 2 weeks, Houston, Tennessee, back-to-back games, he's most likely going to start opposite Brian Thomas. Parker Washington's available in a lot of leagues. So along with Nick Westbrook-Akine, it seems like we're targeting a lot of the options in the Jacksonville and Tennessee games. And also don't forget at running back there, Tyjae Spears too. He's available in about 40% of leagues. So coming back from the concussion, you can pick up Tyjae Spears also just in case. He scored 8.1 PPR points or more in 3 of his last healthy games. All right, let's wrap it up with the tight ends. Dave, who are the tight ends that we're looking at?
Oh, man, there's so many. There's Will Dissly, who's 50% available, and you can actually use him this week at Atlanta and then next week at Kansas City. We know how the Chiefs have been against tight ends. Okay, I lied. That's the list. That's it. It's just Will Dissly. There are other tight ends that have either played already in week 13 who you might not be able to pick up, like Cole Kmet or Theo Johnson. And there's other guys like Pat Freiermuth and Austin Hooper. Just not very exciting names. I think to me, Will Dissly is the number one guy. And going back to the idea that if you can pick up players that played on Thursday, Jake Ferguson might be out of the concussion protocol the next time the Cowboys play a game. And he's somebody that maybe could be like a top 15 fantasy tight end.
You could get Dawson Knox just in case that Dalton Kincaid is not available. He did have 4 for 40 in his last game prior to their bye week. We'll see how he does this week against San Francisco. They get the Rams in week 14. If you want to stash him just in case, deeper leagues, Tyler Higbee's practicing. So, put him on an IR spot just to see what happens there. You never know if he looks decent coming off their injury. Yeah.
What about Marquise Brown? There have been rumors that he might be able to make a comeback this season. He's been on IR for the Chiefs. If you've got an empty IR spot, it probably won't hurt to throw him in there. You might not be able to use him.
Yep.
But just another name to put in there in that same vein as Tyler Higbee.
And one more tight end who's been awesome is Noah Gray. He's got 4 touchdowns in his last 2 games. I mean, look, if he has another touchdown this week in the game on Friday against the Raiders, you have a few more hours to pick him up. You will be starting him in week 14 with all these teams on a bye, taking on the Chargers, who have been hit or miss against tight ends, mostly been good. But still, if you're getting this many red zone opportunities from Patrick Mahomes, why would you not want to pick him up? All right, Dave, any DSTs?
Can I give you 4 DSTs?
Yep.
Saints, Seahawks, Browns, Bengals.
Yeah, Saints are the prize right now. Giants obviously are a mess. We don't know who will start a quarterback, but seems like it's going to be Tommy DeVito. So I've been trying to stash the Saints in a few leagues myself just to see. Not a bad call at all. All right, that'll do it for us here on Fantasy Football Today Express. Good luck with all of your matchups in Week 13. We'll give you the full list of waiver wire options, obviously, going into Tuesday on Week 14, but it never hurts to prepare and get ahead, and Dave's done a great job in getting you set for that. So for Dave Richard, I'm Jamie Eisberg. Thanks for listening.